Greetings, everyone. I am very excited today to be in an interview and talking with Natasha Kealoha, and we're going to be exploring star lines and ancient seafaring navigation and how that can guide us in our own efforts to navigate these very intense times that we're in on our planet and with the cosmic energies. So I think this is going to be a profound conversation. And I want to also just say that we initially connected and started exploring this because we both are very concerned about the importance in astrology of reweaving the energies and wisdom of the southern hemisphere with the northern hemisphere. And these star lines do that in a very powerful way. So I'm excited that you're going to be sharing more of that with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
So let me briefly introduce you and then we'll get into our conversation. So she is a cosmic navigator, and I love that term, integrating astrology, astronomy, and her Polynesian ancestry. And she believes that astrology is a powerful tool for self-discovery and healing and can help to awaken our own unique connection to the cosmos while deepening our connection within. So she offers readings, teaches workshops, has an astrological newsletter, and is really helping guide us in this intense time that we're in. So thank you for doing this today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So before we talk about the star lines, talk
Mhm.
about how you got into astrology and into this interest in cosmic navigation.
Yes, so it's really fascinating. I actually didn't know I was going to be an astrologer. That was a surprise to me, but I've always been into astrology ever since I was a child. And growing up, going into, my teenage years and my 20s, I would always ask my friends and family for their birth information and chart their charts on like free astrological software online. I had no idea exactly what I was looking at, but I was really drawn to what I was seeing in the charts, even though I couldn't, articulate exactly what I saw at the time. But then I was really on the path to go and get my master's degree at the end of like 2018, going into 2019 in counseling psychology. But I was really dragging my feet. And then I had this realization that it's something that I just didn't want to do. It was something that I thought I should do rather than something that my heart was calling me to do. So I made the decision not to go after my graduate degree, which totally threw me for a loop because I had been on this academic train for so long. But then in 2019 as well, there was a lot of trauma that kind of came up for me, like really fast and a lot at the same time. And so I needed something to help me navigate what I was experiencing and what I was going through. And I'm an advocate for therapy, and I've done therapy throughout the years, but I needed something more than just therapy. And so I got back into astrology, but on a deeper level. And it was actually a class that I took with Divine Harmony called Astrology in Your Shadow, which she helps guide you through your chart and to witness and notice the shadow aspects of your chart in order to see your light. And so that completely changed my life and then put me on this huge trajectory to astrology and becoming an astrologer. And I took multiple classes throughout 2019. And then in 2020, I was like, okay, you know what? Because I had taken this huge break from working in the, you know, real world because I really needed to uncover and unpack all of these deep things that were arising for me. And so finally I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm solid enough. I can apply for a job and get back out into the world. And so I applied for a job, and the next week the world shut down because of COVID. And so I was like to the universe, I was like, okay, so no to that job then. So then I all of a sudden had all this free time. So I started to take even more astrology classes. And then at a point in the mid 2020 range, one of my family members who I'm really close to asked me for an astrological reading. And my immediate response was, no, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't come to me. I just know how to read my chart. And her faith in me was unwavering. She's like, you could literally tell me anything. I don't know anything about astrology. So I gave her the reading, immediately connected with it, completely loved it. And she even mentioned to me, she's like, you really should consider doing this as a thing. And so then I started to do more readings for friends and family who then referred me out to their friends and family. And then that's how the ball got rolling. And that's how I've been doing astrology ever since. And I'm completely honored in what I do. But through the last 4 years, I would say, I felt really uncomfortable saying that I was an astrologer. And maybe it's because it was so, felt like vastly different from the academic career that I was on for so long, the academic career path. And so it felt really awkward saying to people, especially people that I knew that knew me way back then, but didn't know that I was into astrology my whole life, that like admitting that I was an astrologer felt really uncomfortable for me. But then it was at the end of last year, I was part of Keone Hanale's Aloha Ma mentorship, which also completely changed my life. And through that experience, I recognized and realized that there was actually a title that was awaiting me that helped focus and helped me see what I do in astrology in a clearer sense. And that title was Cosmic Navigator. And Cosmic Navigator, I believe, is this title that encompasses my love of astrology as well as my love of astronomy. And it also honors my own Polynesian ancestry. So I am half Samoan and Polynesian, so Hawaiians, Tongans, Samoans, everyone in the Polynesian Triangle, but as well as people in Micronesia and Polynesia, so these, the Pacific Island nations, they are some of the most expert ancient navigators that the world has seen. And so they were able to explore and navigate thousands of miles of open ocean, and they were able to find their way to these really small land masses in like millions of miles of ocean. And they actually call that wayfinding now, being able to navigate open ocean without instrumentation. And I feel like that lends itself beautifully to astrology because astrology is all about wayfinding as well. Except instead of finding your way out in the external world, although it can, just like with physical navigation of the world, I believe astrological navigation can really help us explore and find our way within. So that's how I've came to Cosmic Navigator.
It's just beautiful. And part of what's profound from my perspective is you're integrating astrology with astronomy. And I think as we move into the Aquarian age, astrology needs to reconnect more with astronomy. We need to come back into relationship with the planets and stars, which we're going to get into. Wayfinding is all about that.
Right.
But also, I think you're bringing in this ancient wisdom of these cultures from the past who really understood that there is no separation between spiritual reality and physical reality.
Yep.
So it not only were they able to navigate and uh, be charting continents all over the world, dating back over 12,000
Oh,
years,
totally. Mm-hmm.
but they really understood that connection of inner reality and outer reality, which is part of what you're doing with your cosmic navigator work.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. Yes. And I completely agree with you. Astrology reconnecting back in with astronomy, I think, is huge. And just like you had said at the beginning of this, too, reweaving the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, I think, is so important as we move into the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius is that connection to the stars and the sky. And so it is loud and profound. That's a profound theme, I believe, going into this new age.
Beautifully said, because I love that Aquarius is the constellation of the water bearer,
Mhm.
pouring the living waters of wisdom to the earth
Mhm.
from the sky.
Yes.
So it's really helping us reconnect with the wisdom of these cosmic energies that are guiding us through this transition time on the
Yes.
planet.
Yes. And they've always been there. It's just that we got, there's a lot of survival that needed to happen. So we kind of almost, disconnected a little bit from the cosmic energy in order to survive. But I feel like now our survival now connects back into the sky. and breathing that energy back into the planet.
Well, another way to put that, and I think you and I talked about this when
Yes.
we talked before, that I'm very interested in the precessional cycle and that
Mm,
24,000 year cycle that
yes.
we go through and how it correlates with the Hindu Yuga cycle.
Mm,
And I think
mhm,
it's very significant that as we're moving into the age of Aquarius, we're moving out of, from the Hindu Yuga cycle perspective, the Kali Yuga,
mhm,
its last 6,000 years of disconnection and
mm,
forgetting to come back into higher consciousness. And we're going to talk about these Polynesian seafaring navigators, but you and I also talked about Charles Hapgood's book
mhm,
that he originally wrote in 1966, but it's just been republished in 2014.
mhm,
His book was Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, and he has this evidence of ancient maps, including a map of Antarctica
mhm,
before there was ice on the landform. So these maps date back at least 12,000 years from these seafarers who were mapping all the continents
mhm,
without instrumentation. But he noted that their ways of navigating and their maps were more advanced than what we had up to the 18th century in Europe.
mhm. Wow.
So, and I think this is part of what you're tapping into, that you're bringing
Mhm,
to the ancient wisdom of these lineages of
mhm.
ancient cultures that we're needing to reconnect with
Yes,
as we
yes.
move into the Aquarian age.
Definitely. Yeah, and I love that there is this really loud call for many about reconnecting in with Indigenous roots and that Indigenous wisdom. But I love that it's all happening during the age of Aquarius, which is all about the future and the new. So it's about combining this tradition with progress and being able to really translate this ancient wisdom in ways that's really resonant with now. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Mhm.
So tell us about the navigation. Tell us about the star lines, how they
Yes.
reweave the northern and
Mm,
southern hemispheres, but what
yes.
they teach us.
Right. Yes. So backing up a little bit. So the back when I was really getting into studying fixed stars, that was back in like 2022, I started to go really deep dive into Polynesian wayfinding or ancient wayfinding. And again, wayfinding is defined as the navigation without use of instrumentation. And so on my journey of uncovering all of that, I discovered the what's called the Polynesian Voyaging Society. And this was created back in I wrote the date, 1973. And it was created by three men, Ben Finney, Herb Kavainui-Kane, and Tommy Holmes, who are all scholars or historians. And they created the Polynesian Voyaging Society to really test the theory that ancient Polynesians and Melanesian and Micronesians were able to navigate the open ocean without using instrumentation. And this was to challenge the academic thought at the time that ancient Polynesians only happened upon these islands and that they just accidentally drifted. And it's like, oh, we bumped into an island. Now this is home. And so they actually created a 60-foot replica of a ancient Polynesian voyaging canoe, and they named it the Hokulea, which is the zenith star to Hawaii, which means that this star reaches its highest height over the Hawaiian Islands and then sets. And Hokulea, the Western name for it is Arcturus. And so they created this canoe, and at the time too, Hawaiian culture was really constricted and restricted at the time because of colonization and the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom and all of this stuff. So the language was illegal for a time, and being able to do their cultural practices was also legal and banned. And so this resurgence of hokulea and this like really catapulted this cultural renaissance in Hawaii. And it really helped them connect back in with their ancient ancestry to the stars and to being able to navigate open ocean. And so they did their maiden voyage which was from Hawaii to Tahiti back in 1976, just using ancient wayfinding techniques. But at the time, there was no Polynesian navigator alive that knew how to do this because it was lost at the time. And so Polynesian Voyaging Society recruited a master navigator from Micronesian islands who grew up learning how to navigate the open ocean since he was a child. And that was like a generational thing on his island. So his name is Maupiai Lug, and he was from the Carolinian Islands, I believe, from Satawal, this small island. And so they recruited him, and he was the first master navigator to navigate the Hokulea from Hawaii to Tahiti. And then they sailed it back, and it was proven that you can navigate the open ocean without the use of instrumentation. And by doing that, they would observe the rising and setting of stars. They would read the wind currents, the air currents. They would read the signs from nature, so like birds and sea life, being able to see all of these uh, natural things interplay together, being able to navigate their way to this tiny speck of islands in the ocean. And so ever since then, the Hokulea has out now, I believe actually in March of this year, it'll be the 50th anniversary of Hokulea's maiden voyage. And so since in those 50 years, Hokulea has actually sailed hundreds of thousands of miles from with ancient wayfinding techniques, being able to find these, islands, and they've been all over the world, not just in the Polynesian Triangle, just sailing this particular canoe. So it's really quite incredible. And one of the big names in the Hawaiian navigation, his name is Nainoa Thompson. He was one of Mao's students. And he really started to revolutionize his own observations of the sky and his own interactions with the natural world. And he started developing his own techniques, being able to navigate. And so he used and he incorporated a lot of what Mao taught, and then incorporated his own viewpoints as well. And one of those viewpoints is the four star lines, or the four Hawaiian star lines. And what that is, it's basically, I know you have some images of the four star lines, but what it entails is that because Hawaii is in the northern hemisphere and a lot of the Polynesian islands are actually in the southern hemisphere, he needed to be able to read the stars going from northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. So these star lines are actually connecting stars and constellations that you see in the northern hemisphere, and they have all anchor points in the southern hemisphere. So these four star lines, I kind of see them as star paths or star highways that are connecting the northern and southern hemispheres together. And so what we would think that the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere are just disconnected, these star lines actually show that it's been connected the whole time.
And they reweave the wholeness of the sky.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Which is beautiful.
Yes.
Before we get into the details of
Yes.
them, part of what you're saying that I think is so important, and I remember in a recent interview I did with Keone, he talked about how as we move into the Aquarian age, we need to recover our capacity to observe and not just rely on documentation.
Yes.
Part of what, from my perspective, is so profound about that way of wayfinding is the observation of everything around you, the winds, the angle of the sun, the stars, where they rise and set. Like you said, the migration of the birds, the feeling of the waves, but it's about coming back into deep connection, energies of the earth and sky, and your oneness with all of it, which I think is really part of what we're needing to do to heal and move into the expanded consciousness of the Aquarian age, is come back into that awareness that everything is interconnected and is part of the oneness.
Yes, yes, and beautifully put. And yes, and I totally wholeheartedly agree with you and Keone, and going back into the observational mode of being able to form your own relationship to the sky and to the stars, and like receive downloads to what they're saying, and really like cultivating your own relationship to the earth and to your body and to your whole experience in your life, and being able to observe it and really get out of the logical and the linear bit about it all, and go into the more of the intuitive and feeling part and sensing part, because that really is what makes us human. And so that is a really big part, I believe, too, going into that Aquarian age, is that observation piece.
Well, and let me ask you about this before we put the star lines. You got me to do a deep dive to this website because it's so extraordinary. And they talk about the importance in wayfinding, and I'm not going to know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Nao, the
No.
importance
Mm.
of listening to your intuition, your feelings, your instincts, not just paying attention to your intellect, that's
Yes.
a critical part of wayfinding.
Oh, yes, yes. And it's really interesting too, because Nainoa Thompson was said to quote something that Mao had taught him. And Mao grew up really navigating in canoes that are really close to the ocean. So he developed this really deep connection to the ocean currents and the waves. And a lot of navigation really, kind of is really centered on the stars. And like there's this really beautiful symbolism about being connected to the stars and finding your way through the stars. But what Mao said is if you actually know the ocean, you're never lost.
Mhm.
And so it's because he was had this deep connection because it was like Nainoa said that on one of his voyages, Mao let him navigate and Mao went to go rest. And so Mao told him to stay on this one course, but Nainoa wanted to see if Mao would notice if he went on a different course. And so he moved the canoe just ever so slightly just to see if Mao would notice. And of course, Mao noticed right as soon as he got up. He knew probably right as soon as the canoe moved off of that course they were on because of the way that the waves hit the boat so that he was able to read those signs as well, which is really fascinating. And that also brings into into consciousness about the way that European boats were built. Like the bigger the better. And the more that like you're off the ocean, the more you can't feel the swell. And so it's like, yes, there's beautiful ways to navigate those huge boats, but also you start to lose that deep connection to the actual waves hitting the boat and being able to navigate that way.
Mm. You become more and more reliant on instrumentation and
Yeah.
mathematics and your mind and disconnected from the actual energies around you.
Totally. Yeah. And so it gets less instinctual, although I'm sure there's lots of instincts and intuitions to navigators that do use instrumentation. But going back into the wayfinding piece, using your instincts and your intuition, being able to know what it means that this wave is hitting the boat in this way, or that the wind's coming this way, or that there's a bird that's flying this way, and being able to read those signs is, yeah, huge.
Yeah, if I can, before we pull up the
Yes.
star lines, I found a quote
Yes.
from Thompson
Hmm.
where he said, when everything is going right, I get into a zone, a special place in which all my relations with the canoe, the natural world, and the crew are integrated. You have to be in that special place to navigate well. When you're in the zone, you feel ahead of the game. You find yourself naturally thinking about what will happen next, and you're acting in the future, not reacting to things in the past. You have the star patterns in mind, and you seem to know where you are even when the sky is cloudy and you can't see the stars. You begin to anticipate the weather. It's an awesome feeling, but it's hard to describe. It's like being inside the navigation, participating from the inside.
Wow.
If that
Yes.
isn't a
Ooh.
great metaphor,
Yeah.
how we need to move into the Aquarian age, I don't know what.
Yes, that was beautiful. Thank you for bringing that in. I read that one other time before you had read it. Yeah, I still get goosebumps when I hear that. Yeah, and I think this is, deepening your connection with the sky is deepening your connection deeper within. I'm a firm believer that the further we go out in astronomy and astrology, like going out to these far reaches of space, is really should determine how deep you've gone within.
Ah, beautifully said. As above, so below.
Exactly.
As it
Mhm.
is within us, so it is outside of us.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Should I pull up the images?
Yes, please. Yes.
All right.
All right. So there are four main star lines that have organized the celestial sphere into four sections. And again, these star lines are based on like star patterns that Nainoa Thompson noticed in the sky as he was navigating, also probably while he was on land. So this is star line number one, and it's called Keika o Makali'i, which means the baler of Makali'i. And the baler is like a canoe baler, which is like a cup that you use to bail out water that's come onto the canoe. And I believe the reason why he named it that is because if you can see the curve in the line there, it actually looks like it can be a cup, and the cup is actually holding Taurus and Orion's belt, and the Pleiades, which is Makali'i. So the Baler of Makali'i is in there as well. And so the way that they had described this particular star line rising is that it looks like as it's rising over the eastern horizon, it looks like the cup is picking up and like really gathering Makali'i or the Pleiades and Taurus and Orion's belt. And then as it sets, it's almost like the Aquarian sign where it's pouring out the waters that are in its cup. It's actually pouring out the constellations that it had gathered. So Makali'i and Taurus and Orion's belt and things. And what I love about the star lines too in this representation, as you can see here, it starts at the northern hemisphere, which is Akau North. So the first star in the star line is Capella or Hokule. And there's a southern anchor point when you go around the bend and all the way down to the bottom near Hema South. That means Capella is connecting into this southern star anchor point of Canopus. In Hawaii, they call it Keali'i Kona I Kaleva, which means, I wrote this down, the chief of the southern heavens, because it is so bright in the south. And what I love about this too is Canopus is the brightest star, I believe, in the Carina constellation, which is a boat. And so it's connecting these boats together. But also with this particular star line, it's also connecting the brightest star in the night sky, which is Sirius. Sirius is found in there as well. And so again, this is just star line number one, showing that there is weaving the connection between northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere.
Beautiful. And that imagery of the cup carrying these
Mhm.
energies and carrying the Pleiades across the sky is beautiful.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay.
Okay, and now this is the second star line, and it's called Ka'ivi Kuamo'o. And Ka'ivi Kuamo'o means the backbone or the spine, and in Hawaiian. And I believe the reason they gave this particular star line the backbone imagery is because the star that starts this entire star line is the North Star, is Polaris in the north. And then the southern hemisphere star is actually an entire constellation. It's the Southern Cross, or I believe they call it Crux in the South. And even though there isn't a South Pole star that like points almost directly to due south, what's really interesting is that the Southern Cross, the angle of the stars actually do point due south. And so they do call this constellation in Hawaiian, they call it Hanaya Kamalama, which means to be cared for by the moon. And I was watching this video about Nainoa talking about the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross is really important in to be able to find Hawaii after you've been in the Southern Hemisphere when you're navigating in that way. Because at this special time of year, I believe it's in May to June. If you're coming up from the Southern Hemisphere and you're finding your way home to Hawaii in the north, the Southern Cross will get lower and lower and lower in the sky, closer to the horizon as you get closer to the Northern Hemisphere and closer to Hawaii. But the Southern Cross, there is this really interesting, almost magical way that it interacts with telling you where Hawaii is, because there's something called the meridian, which is basically when the Southern Cross hits the meridian, and basically the Southern Cross is like straight up and down. At certain times of the year and you're in Hawaii, the distance between the top star and the bottom star of the vertical line in the Southern Cross is actually equidistant to the bottom star and the horizon when you get to Hawaii. So it's actually telling you that you're in the latitude of Hawaii. And what I loved about this symbolism was that it's again weaving the southern hemisphere with the northern hemisphere, because in order to tell that you're in Hawaii's latitude is from a southern hemisphere constellation. So again, weaving that in again.
So beautiful. And it shows how attuned they were to not only the different constellations, but where they would rise out of the ocean, where they would sink into the ocean, how you could tell latitude and longitude by where they are in the sky.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Yes, and that actually came to Nainoa Thompson in a dream, was trying to figure out how to tell where Hawaii is when you're coming back from Tahiti. And what came to him in his dream was the Southern Cross. And so that's when he ran out to the ocean. He said like he was jumped out of bed and ran down to the ocean that was close to his house and actually took out a marker and marked on this the signpost because you can see the Southern Cross in certain places in Hawaii, and he marked where the top star and the bottom star was in the Southern Cross, and then the bottom star to the horizon. And he measured it, and he realizes that it was equidistant, and so that's how he knew that the Southern Cross was the star to get him home.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Um, and then also with this particular star line, I also love that it's called, Ka'ivi Kuamo'o. There's this backbone energy to it, especially in relation to Hawaii, because Hokulea Arcturus is in this particular star line, and that's the zenith star to Hawaii. And so beautiful, bright star that's pointing out the Hawaiian Islands is in this particular star line.
And as you were saying, it's so exquisite how it's weaving the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, in this case with the Southern Cross and then Polaris in the north,
Mhm.
but that each one, you and I were talking about this before, integrates one of the constellations associated with the fixed signs. So we had Taurus in the first one,
Mhm.
and now we have Leo in this one.
Yes, yes, yes.
So they're
And
also in those four fixed stars.
And the royal stars that are guardians or protectors of certain directions as well. So that can be found in the four star lines as well, as you'll see in the next two star lines. There are also the other two royal fixed stars that haven't been mentioned yet. And then also in each of the star lines, I had realized that at least one of the stars or one of the constellations are in the Milky Way. So that to me shows that there's this energy and the symbolism that's not only just connecting, being able to navigate the Earth from, the stars, but it's also these star lines are connecting us into the galaxy itself.
Well, and you and I were talking about this before too. I'm so, as we talked about, I'm so tuned into working with the ancient medicine wheel.
Mhm.
And I often weave into my work with the medicine wheel, not only the four directions and the relationship with the earth, but the sky and the four
Mhm.
royal stars. But we always, with the medicine wheel practice, so you're weaving together the wholeness of all that is, but then coming to center. So I
Mhm.
love that these star lines are also calling us back into connection with the Milky Way and our galactic center.
Yes, yes. And I also think that's super important to remember coming into the age of Aquarius as well. So not just the sky that we can see, but deeper and deeper into space itself is there's going to be this, I think it's already happening, this reawakening, this reconnection to cosmic consciousness too.
And being galactic citizens.
Yes. Mhm.
Beautiful.
All right. And with this particular star line, it's one of my favorites. This star line is called Manaya Kalani, which means the chief's fishing line. And we'll get into like why it was named that. But as you can see, there's actually like an entire constellation and then an asterism. That's this entirety of this particular star line. So in the north, in the northern part of this particular star line, it's actually really centered on what's called the summer triangle in the west. But according to Polynesian Voyaging Society, they called it the Navigator's Triangle. And that is Deneb, Vega, and Altair. So if you've gone outside in the summertime in the northern hemisphere, this particular asterism, these three really big stars, bright stars in the sky, dominate the sky. It's like a huge triangle. And what I love about this particular asterism, though, is that Deneb, one of the star points in this particular triangle, is the brightest star to the entry point of the Great Rift of the Milky Way. And so I actually believe that that Deneb, Vega, and Altair triangulate the entirety of the Great Rift of the Milky Way.
That is so beautiful. And that constellation of Cygnus is
Mhm.
so important in ancient cultures. You see connections to it in Göbekli Tepe,
Mhm.
dating back over 11,000 years. The swan, the bird, flying towards the galactic center,
Yes. Yeah.
our connection to source.
Yes. And so where we were mentioning that the other star lines have like at least one star or one constellation like in the Milky Way, this particular star line is all about that great rift of the Milky Way. Yes. And
Beautiful.
then,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, and then it's associated with Scorpius, which I think
Yes.
is very interesting.
So we go down into the south, and you've got the entirety of Scorpius, which they in Polynesian Voyaging Society they call it Kamako Nui o Maui, which means the big fish hook of Maui. But what's really interesting too is that another name for Scorpius is Manaya Kalani, which is the entirety of the name of this entire star line, which is the chief's fishing line. And the reason they call it that is because in Polynesian culture, Scorpius wasn't seen as a scorpion; it was seen as a fish hook, and it was deeply connected to the mythology and the legends of Maui's fishhook. And Maui is a deity that can be found throughout Polynesia, and he's really important around specifically navigation as well, because he was seen as pulling up ocean or pulling up islands from deep within the ocean with his magical hook. And so there was this story that I heard told by a Tongan professor. I'm blanking on his name right now. I hope it comes back to me. Dr. Tavita Kaili. He's a professor at BYU Hawaii. And he was telling the story and Tongan from a Tongan perspective of how if you follow, so say you're in an ancient voyaging canoe and you're following Maui's fishhook and you're believing the legends that Maui reaches down from the heavens and can raise islands from the ocean. Say you're coming up on certain islands following this particular constellation, and where you're coming up to land from the ocean, it looks like the land is actually rising out of the horizon. And so at certain locations and the angle of Maui's fishhook, it looks like Maui is literally reaching down from the heavens and hooking into the islands and raising them so that you can find them and find home.
Oh, that is
And
so beautiful.
yes. And there is also something very fascinating in Scorpius or Maui's fishhook's location in the Great Rift of the Milky Way, because its hook actually goes into the Great Rift of the Milky Way. So I believe the way that this was translated, like for me, was not only is it raising land out of, oceanic consciousness, it's also raising cosmic consciousness out of the Great Rift of the Milky Way, too.
So this one is so powerful because it's so in alignment with the Milky Way
Yes.
and with our connection to source. But then Scorpius also reminding us of our connection with the sea, our source.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's connecting us with the depths. And then I love that these are all, reminding us of these birds and of
Mm-hmm.
our capacity to take flight. So it's the symbolism of these star lines so powerful.
Yeah, it's profound. And also Scorpius is really important in the Southern Hemisphere. So I remember when we first spoke that you had mentioned, that you can see Scorpius in the Northern Hemisphere, which is true. You can see it in certain times of the year. I mean, it's huge. You can't miss it. And I love being able to see Scorpius in the night sky. It's one of my favorite times of the year. But when you actually go to the Southern Hemisphere, Scorpius is huge in like the higher parts of the sky. So it doesn't just stay in the southern skies like it does in the Northern Hemisphere. It actually rises to such a height that two of the main stars of Scorpius are actually zenith stars for two of the Pacific Islands. And so with that, Antares is the zenith star to Rapa Nui or Easter Island, and Shaula or Kamaka, which is like the hook part of the hook star of Scorpius or Maui's fishhook, is the zenith star to Aotearoa in certain parts of New Zealand, which
So
is the bottom part of the Polynesian Triangle.
so these different ancient cultures would have such strong associations between their land
Mm-hmm.
and these particular stars that would be right over them at
Right
the
overhead.
sky.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right. And then this is the fourth star line. And this one is called Kalupe o Kavelo, which means the kite of Kavelo. And Kavelo was a chief of Kauai and Oahu. And the myth is, or the story goes, there was two boys, Cavello and I can remember his name. There was another boy in the story, and they had kites that they were flying. And Cavello's kite actually kind of overtook the other boy's kite, and that was like seen as Cavello's mana or power being really, really strong. And so they were able to, immortalize that in this particular constellation. But also fascinatingly, I had just read from a source actually just last night that there are a few more stars that come off of Markab or Keave in one of those like corners of the Great Square, and it comes off almost like a tail, and so it also can be seen as a stingray, which also has a lot of symbolism that comes with it. But this particular star line is all centered around the Great Square of Pegasus, which is that huge square that you see in the center there. And the northern hemisphere star constellation that's linking down to the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, it's Cassiopeia. But in Hawaii, they call it Iwa Keli'i, which means the chief frigate bird. And frigate birds are really, really important to navigation and are also really sacred in Polynesia because their flight path showed you where land is. And there's a lot of symbolism to navigation, to be able to trust your instincts, being able to really trust your own internal guidance, but also guidance from source and your own ancestors that come through the frigate bird. And so this is linking Iwa Keli'i down into the southern hemisphere of Anka. So Anka is down at like right at the bottom. And Anka is the brightest star in the Phoenix constellation in the southern hemisphere. And so what I really thought was fascinating was these two birds are like these two, one mythical and one very like spiritual and very like real, are deeply connecting the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And then also in that other part of the star line, it also incorporates Fomalhaut, which is one of the royal fixed stars as well, which is
And
connected to a
the royal
direction.
star right under the stars of Aquarius.
Yes. Yeah.
Is the frigate bird the bird that actually migrates all the way to Alaska and then comes down all the way into the southern hemisphere?
Oh my goodness. I've read so much about birds that I get them all mixed up, all the names and things. I am unsure of that, but it sounds correct.
But again, what's so
Yeah.
beautiful is how these star lines weave together the energies of the sea, of
Mhm.
the earth, of
Yep.
animals, of the birds with the energies of the sky, and
Yeah.
that they were actually attuning to the movements and migrations of different birds,
Yes.
knowing their routes, their migratory patterns,
Yeah.
to also be attuning to how they're navigating on the ocean.
Yes. Yes. And there's also really something really special happening with Anka right now too. So I actually Googled this and found out this information right before I actually met Martha Alter Hines, like literally an hour before I met her for the first time. And Anka had always caught my attention just because of the symbolism of it. Anka is again the brightest star in the Phoenix constellation, and it's one of, I believe, like the 57 stars used for celestial navigation because it is so bright. And I thought the symbolism of that is really profound because when we're all going through Phoenix moments, bright lights can really help us guide our way out of these Phoenix moments and really trust the Phoenix moments that we're in because we have this guiding light and this support. And so Anka right now actually has Saturn aligned with it in tropical astrology. And not only that, uh, so Anka and the Phoenix constellation are typically just in the southern hemisphere, but during one part of the year, Anka becomes visible at certain latitudes in the northern hemisphere. So, and that was actually on November 17th, it became visible in the northern hemisphere, which was 2 days before Pluto shifted into Aquarius for 20 years.
Oh my goodness, the symbolism of
Right.
that. We're moving into radical transformation, the
Yes.
phoenix rising.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating, because I was watching it on one of my astronomy apps, like this rising of Anka, being able to see it in the northern hemisphere. And I'm not at the latitude where I could actually see it with my physical eyes, but I could see it on this app where it was above the horizon in the northern hemisphere. at certain times of the night. But then during the day, it goes back down into the southern hemisphere. So Anka and Phoenix are weaving the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere together while Pluto made his final shift into Aquarius on November, I believe it was 19th. And all of this is happening while Saturn is there. And I believe for me, Saturn, is really deeply connected to tradition and the past, and all of these really beautiful things around hard work and dedication and integration, and all of these things. And it's really, he is said to be, the planet of authority. But I believe that there's a missing part of that translation. I believe Saturn is the planet of inner authority. And so Saturn being aligned with Anka is not only activating our inner authority to be able to navigate our own Phoenix moments and being able to lean into the uncertainty and being able to trust the unfolding of what's occurring right now for us in our lives, but it's also connecting into the northern hemisphere with the Eva Kali'i. It's also connecting into the frigate bird energy around guidance and navigation and being able to know that you can find your way home.
Oh, Natasha, this is so beautiful and so powerful in terms of the messages it's bringing to us in this incredible time of transformation. Because for me also, just stop sharing here for a minute. Saturn, I'm quite passionate about Saturn and reweaving a deeper understanding of its meaning as you trace back to more ancient mythology, because in ancient mythology, Saturn is the god of the sweet waters who knows how to move between the worlds.
Oh, wow.
Saturn is, in fact, a planet less dense than water. So I actually see Saturn as our inner shaman.
Wow.
It can
Okay.
guide us in how to shapeshift and how to come from the other realms into incarnation, to hold form lightly, and to trust our capacity to weave the invisible and visible realities together into a wholeness, which again is part of what we're needing to remember and reclaim as we move to the Aquarian age.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. And I also love too that Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius as well. And the fact that he is connecting in with Anka at this time of like this, huge doorway going into this huge transformative period. And I believe that our consciousness around Saturn is also shifting. Just like you said, there's a buoyancy to Saturn. He's so light. I think I read somewhere that if you put him on water, he'd float. And so
water.
Yeah. And so when I read that and I had this epiphany about this like a couple years ago, I was like, then why does he have some of the heaviest meaning in astrology? And I believe it was because that whole journey of thinking that we have to outsource our authority onto others. And the more that we come into our own inner authority, the more buoyant we get. And the more we can trust our own inner authority. And just like you had mentioned, your Saturn being connected to the inner shaman, I got a very clear message last year that I normally don't hear things, I just feel things, but this was very clearly heard. Saturn had mentioned to me that he was an oracle. And I was like, fascinating. Tell me more. And so really connecting into that buoyancy in order to be an oracle, in order to receive downloads and things, there needs to be a certain buoyancy. But I also love that imagery of Saturn having the rings because there is this natural boundary setting and boundary keeping that comes with this particular planet as well. So that we know what to discern when we are channeling, or discern where we are channeling, what information that we're, receiving. And again, being able to trust our own intuition and our own downloads about this. And also, there was this really beautiful image that was shared on NASA's Instagram. I believe it was like last week, where there was a rainbow that was on Saturn's rings that was taken.
This is so powerful because, as you also know, Saturn has this storm system on the northern pole that is shaped in this exquisite symmetrical hexagon pattern, which, if you look at that from numerology, and the hexagon is related to the symbol of life, and 6 is related to the energy of love.
Mhm.
So I love your message from Saturn of it being an oracle guiding us
Yeah.
in how, as it's connecting to the stars of Phoenix, how to move
Mhm.
through this transition, reclaim living from the heart, reclaiming a new way of being here on the planet that is more whole, that is more integrated.
Yes. Yes. And I also believe too that the fact that this rainbow is now showing up while, or at least the picture is shared of this rainbow showing up on Saturn's rings while he's aligned with Anka shows again that Saturn's going through his own transformation and showing that he actually is connected to more than just what we've been thinking about him for eons. And now he's like, I'm ready to shift and change. How about everyone else shift with me?
No, and I love how what you're doing and your connection to these star lines and
Mm,
astronomy. It's reweaving the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, but it's also reweaving ancient wisdom with
mm,
modern knowledge. Like you said, this isn't about going back into the past,
right.
but integrating that ancient wisdom to move into a whole new age. But I think part of why we're needing to reclaim this different understanding of Saturn is I believe Saturn got labeled with this energy of constriction,
Yes.
mortality,
Mm,
outer authority. When we moved into this time of the Kali Yuga and the
mm,
patriarchal period
mm,
and disconnected from the sacredness of the life around us, spirit and the ideal reality became what's transcendent, and this
mm,
level of mortality became a place of constriction and
mm.
death and fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of what's so powerful about these ancient ways of wayfinding and
Mhm.
navigation is their understanding that everything is sacred,
Yeah.
everything is a part of the oneness,
Yeah.
everything is interwoven.
Yeah.
Spiritual reality and this reality are all one.
Yeah. Exactly. And I believe too with Saturn being that last visible planet before you move into the transpersonal planets. And so he's weaving that seen and unseen realm, like you were mentioning too. I believe his alignment with Anka at the time of all of this is really being able to bring the unseen realm and make it visible and really revealing what is hidden. And so I think he's awakening our inner authority as well as our own inner oracle as well, which I think is fascinating because he's in tropical Pisces, which is the sign of the oracle as well. So yeah, just big transformations all around for the northern hemisphere, for the southern hemisphere, um, for humans and consciousness on the planet. But I also really truly believe that this is a time that is just deepening into our trust to be able to know how to navigate these uncertain and turbulent times. And yeah, we can have trust in ourselves, but this is like really deepening that connection within so that we can really trust our connection to the outer world and really form that connection and that relationship again, like our ancestors did.
Beautiful, profound. And it is so amazing how significant Saturn is in this time, but
Mhm.
also Uranus, the modern ruler of
Mhm.
Aquarius,
Mhm.
is now very close to the Pleiades.
Mhm. Yep.
So, and that's a very important part of that first star line.
Mhm. Mhm.
Those rulers, planetary rulers of
Right.
Aquarius, are bringing our attention back to these star
Mhm.
lines and to how
Wow.
found this time of transformation.
Ooh. And I just got the download that you just mentioned. It's being connected to the first star line and the fourth star line. That's the first and fourth. That's like simultaneous endings and beginnings, which I believe is a huge theme for 2025. And also, it really heightens to this kind of paradox energy that I see coming in for 2025. And paradox just meaning we're moving away from that separate idea of separate, of just like either or black and white thinking, and we're moving more into the both and. Can we be with it all without making something wrong or ugly or evil? And can we actually just start to see the unity in it all?
And move out of polarity and
Yes.
duality into
Yeah.
unity consciousness.
Right.
In terms of that, can you say a little
Yeah.
bit more about what you were saying to me before we started recording about how these star lines are all connected?
Oh, yes.
Again,
Yes.
they form a wholeness
Hmm.
in how you interact with them.
Yes, so it's really fascinating. The four star lines, how Nainoa Thompson saw them. He created these patterns or these star lines based on actually how they rise. So one rises and then the next one follows and then the next one follows and the next one follows. And so they're all interconnected because they all follow each other or lead the way, whichever way that you're looking at. But I really believe, what's really fun with these particular star lines is that you can actually chart some of these stars, or actually all of these stars, in your natal chart. And you can actually start to see, oh, and have this awareness, oh, that's a star that was in the southern hemisphere and it's conjunct this thing. And so we can start to weave the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere information within. Even if we don't logically know what that means yet, we're actually weaving together northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere stars in our own natal chart and being able to read that too.
And helping our inner reality come into more wholeness as we're
Yes.
connecting to these stars and they're connecting the wholeness of the sky.
Yes, exactly. Which reflects the wholeness within.
Are there other ways that we can work with these stars and any other guidance you have for us about how we can be navigating this time?
Yes. So I had mentioned it before. These star lines really started to help me just anchor in to my own authority about being able to navigate my own life. It doesn't mean that I have to be out on a boat wayfinding, although it'd be really cool to be on Hokulea and like experiencing that. I hope that actually happens one day. But being able to like know that you can actually navigate whatever experiences are coming forward, whatever, is unfolding in the external world, and really just again deepening your own connection to you within is like I believe paramount for these, well, 2025 and then moving forward throughout the rest of the decade. And we're in this really big time of huge shifting and changing, like we had mentioned when we were talking earlier about all of the outer planets shifting signs in tropical astrology. And not only that, we also have planets in the Oort cloud as well as planets in the Kuiper belt also shifting. So those are like the outer reaches of like our solar system, which can reflect outer reaches of our own human consciousness. There's also movement there too. So a lot of shifting and a lot of moving. And so being able again to really trust what's being burned away through that Phoenix journey of like could be burning away as self-doubt or like really, not believing that you can be able to navigate your own realm, even though, we have no idea how to logically do it. This is where we get to deepen our own relationship to intuition, deep our own relationship to the cosmos or to whatever feels right for you to know that you are navigating, even if we can't see the signs ahead, and just deepening that trust.
And would you say it also is burning away that sense of our separation and
Yeah.
disconnection so that it's both guiding us to go deeper within and
Mm-hmm.
trust our own intuition
Yeah.
and to also trust that we are held by
Mm-hmm.
the energies of the sea, of the sky, of the stars to
Yeah.
be guided through this phoenix time,
Oh,
this
definitely.
transmutation.
Definitely. And what you had just mentioned, held, I love that the feeling of when you say that too, of being held, being able to go through a Phoenix journey, I think is huge because sometimes we can just think bright light and it's just combustion and like it can be really difficult. But know that we're actually being wrapped up and being held by our own guides, by our own ancestors, by, our friends and family and within to be able to move through these times of great change. And also, what came up for me too when you said held was that, you had mentioned Uranus, the contemporary ruler of the Aquarian age, is in the first star line, and which is closest to the Pleiades, which is actually being held by that cup. And so it's Uranus, the ruler of it, is actually being held and supported by the stars themselves as we move into this new age too.
Mm, beautiful. Well, thank you for being such a profound cosmic navigator.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
tell how people can get in touch with you and any
Yeah.
upcoming programs you have going
Yeah.
on.
I have a website. It's natashakeastrology.com. And on there, you can find all of the different readings that I offer. And also, you can sign up for my free astrology newsletter. I'm sorry. And on that astrology newsletter, that's where I post, astrology from my perspective. So, like, I weave in a lot of Cosmic Navigator things, or at least I'm starting to. And I also co-teach classes called Navigating Now with my mom. And my mom is, she calls herself an energy seer and healer. And so how we work together is I focus on an astrological alignment that really catches my attention. And then my mom leads us through meditations to be able to ground in and anchor in that energy that can get a little heady when we're in the astrology realm of it all. And we usually just do them in person, but our goal for this upcoming year is to actually offer it on Zoom so that we can reach a bigger community. And so being able to access that information around those classes will be found on my newsletter, which you can sign up for on my website.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being in this conversation. Thank you for the profound work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And I was so excited when you had reached out to me and like I had mentioned, when you had said that you saw that the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere needed to be integrated again, that clicked on the star lines for me in a whole new way, which I'd been researching for years beforehand, and then saw that they came into total alignment with what you were mentioning. So thank you again for reaching out to me, and also to Martha for linking us, and also Keoni for linking us as well. So yes, so thank you, thank you, thank you. It was an honor to be here today.
And I will say, I'll let everyone know that we're forming a group to be exploring more how to weave the Southern Hemisphere stars and wisdom with the Northern Hemisphere. So hopefully there will be more coming about our explorations and our navigating that process together.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all of those of you who are listening, who are part of this community as we're navigating this time of intense transformation. Blessings and love to all of you.